So I'm making this video today just to, I think, bring up something pretty important in the wake uh, of all the crazy shit that's been going on. And yeah, it's basically about the political spectrum, and I think how people often misunderstand it. And I've got a diagram here just as a visual aid, just so it'll help with how I'm explaining this stuff. So. Um, you'll I'll cut to that now, and you'll see that here. Alright, as you can see here, this is the diagram I have here for the political spectrum. It's a beautiful diagram. Some are even saying it's the most beautiful diagram of all. But as you can see, we've got right wing here, left wing here, center left here, center right here. So basically, what I thought I'd do is try and break down where people go wrong with this. And the spectrum extends only to 90% of the way on the right and 90% of the way to the extreme left. So as we can see here, we have Hassan Piker, who's a communist, and we get to 90%. And we basically we're in the MAGA Republican range with Charlie Kirk. Now, Trump is even beyond Charlie Kirk, so Trump's probably at probably beyond 90%, but Charlie Kirk's probably around this area here. As we move towards the total center of the political spectrum, we see here we go from MAGA Republicans like Charlie Kirk to the hardline or moderate right Republicans, and this is exemplified by the 1980s conservatives of President Ronald Reagan and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in the UK, and pretty much endorsed by the economic theories of Milton Friedman, famous and notable conservative economist. As we move towards more the center-right area, we come to President Dwight D. Eisenhower, and TR is Theodore Roosevelt, or Teddy Roosevelt. These Republicans were a lot more closer to the center of the political spectrum than what we see today, where it's gone from them to Reagan, basically trickle-down economics, and even since the 1980s, in the 2010s, we see the movement of MAGA, created by Trump. Yeah. So we get to the center here, and I'm not sure if there is such a thing as a true centrist. There tends to be an overlap among 95% of people of, I would say, some region of, hardline right to social democracy politics with centre-right and centre-left. I don't know if there is a single person who can legitimately claim to be a true centrist of politics. But we get to the centre-left, and this is exemplified by the Australian and UK current Prime Ministers Keir Starmer and Anthony Albanese, with their respective UK and Australian Labor parties. An American general parallel to this would be, this is just a general description, of course. I mean, of course, there's going to be differences and more specific exceptions, but this is a general, beautiful diagram, as you can see. But along the centre-left of UK and Australian Labor parties, we have FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, with his chief policy accomplishment being the New Deal of the 1930s, as well as the centre-left is exemplified economically by JMK, meaning John Maynard Keynes, it could be argued he comes closer to the range of social democracy economic theory, but I think it's more accurate to state that John Maynard Keynes falls into the centre-left area of the political spectrum. Going further left, we get to the Nordic countries and Nordic model, which I am primarily in favour of. I would say, me personally, I tend to fall between centre-left and social democracy. Social democracy, of course, is the Nordic countries being Norway, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, and Iceland. And Bernie Sanders here, he calls himself a democratic socialist, but he repeatedly refers to the economic system of the Nordic countries, or Scandinavian countries in a more general sense. So, Norway, the Nordic countries being Norway, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, and Iceland. Bernie calls himself a democratic socialist, but I think that's mainly just for colloquial or just general reasons for people in the USA to understand, because they're not, very generally speaking, they're more familiar with the term of democratic socialism, but really Bernie Sanders is a social democrat or a social democracy economic advocate of the Nordic model. John Maynard Keynes, I think, falls somewhere in the range of centre-left to social democracy. I'm by no means an expert in economic theory, but I tend to align personally with, I think the Nordic countries have the best current model in the world. But that's, I've addressed that before, I think, in my very first video. But going even further to the left and approaching Hassan Piker territory, we get to veritable democratic socialism, which has only ever, from my research, ever occurred once in history, an actual country implementing democratic socialism in the real sense of the word, which would be the 1970 to 1973 Chilean government of Salvador Allende. So despite Bernie Sanders and Zoran Mamdani, I think it's fair to say Zoran Mamdani, I would argue, probably is more... Mamdani also calls himself a democratic socialist, but I think in the US that really means just the Nordic model, the Nordic economic model of social democracy. But legitimate democratic socialism has only ever occurred once under the government of Chile in 1970 to 1973 of Salvador Allende, who was overthrown by Augusto Pinochet in 1973 in the coup d'etat. Even further, now we come to 90% of the way there. So this is just 90% of the way, and I'll explain what's beyond this, the extremes here. So we basically get to Hassan Piker, who I vehemently disagree with. I think discussion and debate, respectfully, is something that the world has really failed at in recent times. And I think, I completely disagree with Hassan Piker on a lot of things, but I guess I should say primarily being, I think he's a communist, and his endorsement of terrorism and interviewing the terrorist were despicable and disgusting. And, his stance on Israel and Palestine, or the Israel and Gaza war, I think he said some absolutely deplorable things, which I think needs to be called out more and condemned. I think, always be peaceful. Violence is not the way. I said that before. So explaining now what goes beyond the 90% extremes here, from 95% to 100% on both sides of the right wing and left wing extremes. Like, there's no even attempt at covertness. It's just basically open, blatant endorsement of violence. So examples for that on the far left, from 95% to 100%, which is not visually shown in my beautiful diagram, but examples of that would be the Red Brigades were active in Italy from the 1970s to the 1980s, and they were a Marxist-Leninist armed group active during Italy's years of lead. They explicitly endorsed violence against conservatives, Christian Democrats, and capitalists. They're most infamous for kidnapping and murdering Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro in 1978. Furthermore, the Weather Underground in the United States in the 1970s, the Weather Underground bombed police stations, the US Capitol, and the Pentagon. They framed their violence as retaliation against the Vietnam War and conservative imperialism. Slogans included overthrowing capitalism and bringing the war home. Another example would be the Black Liberation Army in the United States in the 1970s, which was a militant offshoot of the Black Panthers and advocated for killing police officers and government officials, whom they equated with a racist conservative establishment. So those are a few examples of 95% to 100% violent left-wing terrorist extremists. Now, again, I'll reiterate, I don't think Hassan Piker, it is fair to equate with these historical groups, but I have vehement disagreements with him on many issues, and a lot of things he's done I've found, frankly, as I said, deplorable. Examples of 95% to 100% far-right violent extremists endorsing organizations historically would be Mussolini's black shirts in Italy from the 1920s to the 1940s, as well as Nazi Germany. Another example would be the KKK, which launched terror campaigns against black Americans, Republicans, and civil rights activists. They committed lynchings, church burnings, and assassinations, and openly endorsed violence as a way to preserve white supremacy and conservative Southern order. So those are examples of extreme nationalist, fascist, and or racist movements that targeted their political opposition. Furthermore, examples of 95% to 100% violent political individuals or groups could be considered violent anarchists. And by no means are all anarchists violent. There are many non-violent anarchists, but examples of violent ones would be Leon Czolgosz's assassination of President McKinley in 1901, and Alexander Berkman's attempt on Henry Clay Frick. These were justified as quote unquote propaganda of the deed against capitalism and conservative power. Those examples I mentioned occurred from the 1890s to the 1920s in both Europe and the United States. So I think it is fair to say that MAGA Republicans fall somewhere in the 85% to 90% range and are in favor of what's called laissez-faire capitalism, or which means free market capitalism with very little to no regulations or income taxes. And other terms for this synonymous would be crony capitalism or corporatism. I would argue the terms crony capitalism and corporatism are essentially equivalent and essentially resulted from President Reagan's endorsement of trickle-down economics, as well as Margaret Thatcher's in the UK. You get past 90% and you're on the left wing, and you're into Marxist territory or Leninist territory. I'm completely opposed to Marxism, Leninism, communism as a whole. I think it is impossible, and it is not smart in any way, shape, or form to try and implement for society. As I said in my very first video, I'm in favor of a mixed market model, basically 60% social democracy combined with 40% capitalism. So basically what the Nordic countries do. And Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Iceland, in terms of heavily regulating capitalism and taxing the upper bracket rich of society more fairly to help unburden the great crises the world faces with education costs, healthcare costs, childcare costs, and housing affordability. I think the Nordic countries have it basically as good as one could have an economic system implemented. So I would identify as a social democrat with some overlap with centre-right policy proposals and views. So examples of my centre-right politics would be, having secure borders of sovereign countries and not allowing illegal immigration. I think there needs to be, though, some humanitarian quota assistance for genuine asylum seekers and refugees fleeing catastrophic third world countries. But I think, there's been way too much, especially in Europe, and the exact limit needs to be much tighter on that and lower. So that's an example. As I said, I do think capitalism plays an important role in in the world's global economy of complex supply chains. I think humans innately have a need to compete against each other. Whether this occurs fairly or unfairly, I think is irrelevant. I mean, humans have an innate desire to explore, to innovate, to dream for new ideas, and search for new technologies and improved ways of living that makes life less difficult to survive. That about wraps it up. And as you can see from my beautiful presentation here, I wish more people would be aware of these general philosophies or ideologies of the political spectrum. And I think what Trump has done that has surprised me very much in the last 10 years, and I can't believe how many people it has, fooled and just hoodwinked. What Trump has done is to say anyone past center on the left wing of politics, Trump equates with radical. And this should come as no shock to anybody. But for some reason, many, many people have fallen for this. Anyone, doesn't matter if you're centre-left, like UK or Australian Labor, you're social democratic, like the Nordic countries or Bernie Sanders, or you're all the way over in Hassan Piker communist territory. Doesn't matter if you're centre-left. He calls you the radical left, okay, people. So you're all the way over in 90% to 100% extremist, woke, cancel culture, censorship, left-wing territory. And it's astounded me how he has pulled this off. I don't know how. I know he's had a lot of assistance from very big, powerful power brokers in the GOP, on Wall Street, in various political donations and big money donors, but it has really surprised me. It's one of the biggest examples of mass delusion I've ever seen, frankly. And we look at the state of things currently, and it really explains a lot how Trump perfectly timed his running for president starting in 2015 when he went down the escalator in Trump Tower, and how that coincided perfectly timing-wise with, the social media algorithm exploitation of everyday people like me and you. It's really been like so tragic and just done so much damage. And yeah, that's basically why I did this video, just to at least do something to share. We can disagree, and it's okay if we don't change our minds. We move on, we vote, we obey the democratic process and the constitution of our countries, and we have more important stuff to do than worry about this political shit. As recent as 20 years ago, most people going about their business on a daily life didn't want to even have to think about politics or get involved. But now it's in everything, and, people can't detach from, social media. So it's really like just tragic. Yeah, so that about wraps it up. Hope you've had a great day, everyone out there, and just fucking chill out and have a few beers and a few potato chips, because that matters a lot more than all this stupid fucking political shit. So, yeah, cheers and peace.